Today we continue our year-end review with an esteemed panel of respected voices in the film industry. Hosted by Tebogo Alexander and comprising of Katarina Hedren, a film commentator and critic, University of Johannesburg's film academic Dr. Nyasha Mboti, and filmmaker Dare Oluwasanmi.
For me, I don't see much highlight in this year compared to last year. I know there's been, what I can mention is that I'm happy that the industry seems to be moving up. New things are coming into the industry. We're seeing new directors and producers with new bag of tricks coming into the industry. People are experimenting more. For me, that is my interest, not even about the celebration and the awards and all that.
It's not one thing that has stood out for you.
It's not just one thing.
For you, Katarina?
I have two films that stood out for me this year. Timbuktu, Abdurrahman Sissako's film, so as wonderful as I thought it would be. And Philippe Lacotte from Côte d'Ivoire, his debut feature called Run, which is an amazing film too.
And Nyasha, for you, what would a highlight be?
My highlight is the Oscar nomination for Javeni Waruri's Erelwani, sort of the first vendor language film in South Africa. So it's been big.
You wanted to add something else, Katarina?
Yes, I wanted to add a South African film, Love the One You Love by Jen Abbas. A really low-budget film that won the award for Best Film in Durban. South African Best Film.
It was a bit of an odd film, scriptless in many ways.
Very odd, experimental and psychedelic and super charming.
What thoroughly disappointed you? For you, nothing really much?
For me, one particular low point actually, and maybe this is something that is personal to me, but part of the work that we've been doing in the South African film industry has been trying to find a way to take film to audiences that do not normally go to, let's say, Stekineko and New Metro cinemas. So these are the audiences that are in the townships and rural areas. This is like 40 million South Africans. So we've been working with one of our friends. His name is John Enshebek, and our concept was a concept called Riachile. We used to put 60 seats in townships and rural areas.
As a Nigerian-born filmmaker, what are your thoughts of the Half a Yellow Sun? Some of the write-ups talk to Half a Yellow Sun as setting a new agenda. Is it something you'd agree with?
For me, I think the movie Half of a Yellow Sun goes back to what I believe usually make African films successful. When you find a lot of African films that are really successful, they focus on political or our social focus in Africa. Half of a Yellow Sun did the same thing, talking about the history of Nigeria. So for that, I like it. I love it. It's one of those ways that we use film to archive and talk about our history. So for me, in that way, that film was successful. The cinematic approach to it also very, very nice. The narrative.
So I'll add the aspect of the audience. So you have this story in a peculiar form of storytelling, which I think is African. But then there's something else, there's important integral ingredient, and that is the audience. And what, for instance, Nigerian film has done is actually crack the market. For the first time in Africa, you have a formula about, okay, here's how the film that we make, the product that we make, this is how it reaches the audiences for which it is intended. In South Africa, we still have that sort of problem. How do we actually get our product to the audience?
Particularly with the aspect of storytelling, there's a sense on one side that our history is just important, and in no way are we saying it's not. But there's also the aspect of ordinary stories. I mean, we attended Ramadan Suleiman's awarding with the French Award, and one of the things he's the respected filmmaker for, the people who watch his work and comment on it, is that he tells stories from a perspective of ordinary people. Even, I suspect, the impact of politics on ordinary people.
If I can add just to that, I mean, that's something that Half of Yellow Sun also do. I mean, the ability to find the ordinary in the extraordinary, if you want. So this one talks about a particular time and political time in the political history of Nigeria, but it also has time for people falling in love, people fighting with their mother-in-law, you know, and that's how you make stories real.
I'm surprised that none of you mentioned the as somebody called it read recently, the Lupita effect. Is it anything to celebrate that she won the award? Is that one of the things we can
struggle
put up
with
there?
that, selecting an African and making that African, the one that's going to solve everything. There are lots of fabulous Africans, storytellers, actors, smart people, beautiful people. So I don't feel I think it's good for her.
She was born as an
It's
individual.
good if people, I don't know if it's going to lead to people also coming towards African cinema. If not, then it's good for her, and I'm happy for her. But I don't believe in this great savior narrative.
Yeah, I think we can celebrate her as we rightly should, but I think rightly so, it's just a drop in the ocean. There are lots of other African stories and other African celebrities who are not celebrated, and therefore I feel, you know, that savior complex, like he's saying, is not necessarily one that we should impute to that. But it certainly is an award that we should all celebrate, but not necessarily use it to draw attention away from sort of the beautiful, wonderful, creative stuff that is actually going on the ground, and which we really hear about, and which we should actually hear about.
And it is a problem with that story also about Lupita, because it is, despite everything, despite her being African, despite her being so dark, despite her not having a weave, she's wonderful. And I mean, that's not a wonderful
I
story.
do agree with my other two speakers on that particular one. A story or the narrative is something, I mean, a story is something we should celebrate for what it is, for her personally having achieved the kind of heights she's done personally. But we should not, as African, let that affect us negatively in terms of how the West usually look at Africa with a neo-colonialism kind of outlook. To say, no, this is, you know, like sometimes the way they celebrate us doesn't do us much good. We are far better than once in a while giving us a little pat on the back.
It's actually, if I'm to be critical, I would say that's tokenism, you know, tokenism, which is sort of picking up an honorary black and saying, oh, look at them, they're great, they're wonderful. And historically, tokenism doesn't actually work. It's an
Not
insult.
like the others.
It's an insult, yes, not like the others. Honorary,
Yeah.
they're great and so on.
We know we're great already.
We just need to celebrate the work of sort of the unheralded, if you want, the people who are sort of behind the scenes, who actually make the industry tick. When we see a finished product, you seldom think about what's happening behind the camera. You always think, oh, here's a wonderful product. You don't know that there was 200 hours of filmmaking that had to be cut down to 90 to make a feature film, and who sweated, you know, sweat and blood to create that. So I just want to say, yeah, we also need to remember sort of those people who are working behind the scenes.
Welcome back to Film South Africa, and if you've just joined us, then you're just in time for the second half of our panel discussion where we looked at Africa's cinematic landscape that was 2014. Colleague Tebogo Alexander hosted film critic Katarina Hedren, filmmaker Dare Oluwasanmi, and film academic Dr. Nyasha Mboti, who spoke to us about the importance of the African story.
If we keep making film here in Africa that are not really relevant to our audience, we're failing. And for me, that's the part I'm interested in. Like I said, I've seen some improvement. Like the same kind of cinema style that you did mention.
Yes, Nyasha was talking about the
camera.
community,
Community,
cinemas,
micro, informal cinema. I think we should have more of that, and I've seen people trying to come up with one model or the other. Also a friend of mine, Tapelo, Mokoena, with the Kazi movie night, rooftop movie, you know, just kind of informal this thing for me. I've seen it growing, but I believe we should focus more on growing the audience.
You said something about story that I don't remember now, or to make films that people want to see. I think the problem is, the thing is, people want to see film from South Africa, and people want to see film from Africa. I co-run the First Wednesday Film Club at Atlas Studios every month, and we have 250 people coming every month to see our films. I mean, granted it's for free, granted they get food, and granted it's a cool place, but people actually come and people enjoy the movies. So,
no, what I'm talking about is not the story. Sorry, I mean distribution. We should work more, and I've seen a lot of people trying to bridge the gap between just producing and not actually reaching the audience properly. And some of the people who have gotten the budget, I would say most of the film that they've made are just made for a few people. Like recently I saw very, very good film, Act to Get. A South African production. Recently I saw it just a few days ago. I understand the audience in the cinema, but my question is, how will that movie reach the guys in Alex? Do you understand what I mean? It's in the cinema, and very soon it will be off the shelf at the cinema. That's my problem, distribution.
The models I think South African theatre owners and distributors use is basically on the numbers in the movies, but something to me that contradicts that effort is that the film must make its own numbers, whereas we know that the films that come from Hollywood have come with a huge marketing budget. And films like Elelwane, Hard to Get, didn't. I mean, Elelwane took a very long time for Elelwane to reach audiences and be on screen.
That the filmmaker is actually very disgruntled about. The fact that his film hasn't yet been to Venda, for instance. The audience that is central to that story haven't yet watched the film. That's particularly because you've got a tradition of distribution in South Africa that is a duopoly. It's dominated by just two companies, right? Stain Kineko and New Metro, and you have indigenous distributors having 1% share of that market. You have to sort of find an alternative to that. So not necessarily compete with the big cinemas, but actually cater for the audiences that they do not care about, the audience that doesn't make up part of sort of their audience base, their client base.
And some people actually do that. That must also be acknowledged, that not everyone is standing in line for New Metro and Stain Kineko to have pity and put their films up for 2 weeks or something. People do say stuff that and find their own solutions.
But I think I heard you earlier on, correct me if I'm mistaken, that you said that some 90% of audiences, what was your figure, don't actually access cinemas?
Yes, like most so what it would cost, let's say I stay in Kwamashu. So the study we did was in Durban. I would need 13 rand to get into town, 10 rand to go to Suncoast, and back and then back home and so on. I would need money for the ticket, Coke and popcorn. So the figure comes up to something like 150 rand. Now, that's just for me. If I have to take my family, my wife and kids, to watch a movie on a big screen, I'd need money that actually a majority of South Africans don't have for entertainment. What it means is, I think South Africans in general, this majority that I'm talking about, these 40 million South Africans, would actually have about 15 rand to spend on entertainment. I don't think they have 150 or 500 every week to spend on movies. So if they have 15 rand, what you actually need is a model that speaks to the 15 rand that people have. And so what it means is cinemas need to be in Kwamashi, in Umlazi, in Alex, and Deep Sleuth and so on.
If you are saying that, I'll come to you. If you are saying that, maybe I'll get you to answer this one, Katarina. If we listen to what Nyasha is saying, and we've heard it many times, the potential of audiences, the growth of South African cinema is outside of urban areas. But I'm not seeing the effort. Why would one, just your thoughts having seen the South African landscape, cinematic landscape, why would the people in the business of cinema not even consider that?
One thing that you said, we need a new model. I don't think we need a new model. I think we need many new models. Many different ways.
In the blue. Yeah, right.
Exactly. And then I think maybe there's also an expectancy that the director should also be responsible for the distribution of a film. Or I wish that people would develop like focus on certain things, like distributors. That's what they should do. Countries like France, for example, because they're such a good example. The state loves French cinema because they understand the value of it, and they let foreign films pay for French films. There are ways to.
Could it maybe
to
because
really
that in the South African context, the state hasn't got an understanding of the impact cinema can have on society? Maybe I
don't know if it's the understanding that is lacking, but if the understanding is there, I'd like to see it translated into more support for local film.
I think what I can say concerning this, because now it's we're focusing on South Africa as one of the biggest economy in Africa that we can use as examples for even other African states.
I think in addition to that is that we've got a huge population that is not accessing, whereas beyond the Limpopo, people access cinema.
Yeah, you're right, and that's what I'm saying, that if I look at one of the biggest contributors to that industry, Nigeria, Nollywood, for instance, and based on studies and growing up, the industry itself started in a very, when the Nollywood started in the early 90s, started in a very, very informal way. And it worked for them. But because of the explosion, we now have all the attention on cinema and all that. We seem to be making a mistake here in Africa, trying to adopt the system of Hollywood.
Or throughout the rest of the continent, including South Africa.
And to an extent, it doesn't seem to be working. And I believe right now we're sitting with a dilemma. Check Nigeria. When they started, even the producer doesn't even know himself as a producer. They just know they're making a movie. Sometimes the guy who is the director is also the main actor. They just understand that if we shoot this thing, we edit it this way, we put them on video cassette, we've got a market. They love stories. Only later they started hearing about things like executive producer, like, okay, what is that? Do you understand what I mean? I mean, it started that way. Even prior to that, the Nigerian television and the Nigerian law, they had legislation and law in place that discouraged the influx of foreign content. Because of that, it encouraged a lot of local producers, and the people didn't have a choice. What they've seen on TV is what they watch. What they find to buy in the market is what they buy and go watch at home. Do you understand? So because of that, it allowed the people to find time to love what they have.
Quotas are not on the agenda in South African audience, I would say. For South African,
but I do think that we always need to bring in the history of apartheid when we're talking about the contemporary film industry. We cannot forget the fact that the sort of the template of where film sort of cinema houses are, for instance, hasn't changed. It's the basic architecture of they are placed in well-to-do white areas often. And that hasn't changed much. And the NFF has tried to take, to sort of inculcate a film culture, film-going culture. But there are many reasons that hasn't succeeded, partly because, so the understanding is there from the state that cinema is important, but often there's what I would call a need to sort of go beyond the slogans, you know, to actually ask, sort of consult with the filmmakers themselves and the audiences before you come up with a policy or a slogan. So often you find out that the policy sort of for digital screens that was introduced and then dumped, I think last year or the year before that, it didn't work because there was very little consultation. It did not have community buy-in. It was not going to create jobs in a community. You just create two jobs, the technician and the security guard. But you need, it doesn't need to be cinema. It needs to be more than just cinema. It needs to create jobs in a community. And in a way, it needs to be a model that does not take money from the poor to give to the rich. There needs to be a change, I think, sort of in the way in which we see the business of the film industry. So I think if we could go beyond slogans, sort of as the NFVF and other bodies, the DTI and so forth, and actually consult and actually get buy-in, I think we'd start to see many of these ventures, which are very good in theory, we start to actually see them work in practice. It is working in Nigeria, like Dare pointed out. The informal film industry is huge there. The Bongo film industry in Tanzania is actually huge. It's as big as Nollywood, but they're catering just for the Tanzanian audience. If you go to Uganda, you find the same thing. They have their own film industry there. If you go to Zimbabwe, you're starting to see people, they've what they call the $2 for 2 model. 2 movies are sold at the corner for $1, $1.
Growing a sustainable industry, I mean, it's important to have a sustainable industry, but actually while growing it and in the beginning of growing it, you actually also need to take the focus away from, you can't expect every film to be commercially viable, to make a profit. You must actually be able to, some film have to be able to flop commercially without that being the death of an industry.